A warm welcome to our policy podcast, Building Wealth, Building Community, hosted by Duncan and Andy from the Social Enterprise Scotland policy team. Social enterprises and other types of inclusive democratic business models are building a better economy across urban and rural Scotland. We'll be talking about some of the big policy issues of the day and, crucially, the real-world impacts in our local communities.
Hello everyone, welcome to the podcast. I'm Andy Patterson, speaking with
Duncan Thorpe.
And today we'll be talking about the 2026 Scottish General Election. So we're in the pre-election period currently. So we're talking about what could happen in the run-up to this. So recently we were both at The Gathering, which is SCVO's yearly conference held for the third sector. And we saw a really interesting bit of research there presented by the University of Glasgow's public policy team. And that was to do with the Fiscal Commission and their expectations for the next Parliament. And basically, a continuing story that we seem to hear across the UK and in Scotland is we are all to do more with less, was the general takeaway from the Fiscal Commission. So the current budget that's just been passed is a holding budget. So whoever wins the next election will introduce their next budget in 2027. That's where we'll see the biggest changes with budgetary restraints and to see what the focus of the government will be. And obviously that brings up a new conversation, Duncan, is that how can the Parliament protect its public services? How can we make sure that the Scottish public isn't affected by this decline in revenue that the Parliament and government will be having to deal with? You know, we need to talk about progressive taxation here, investment in tackling child poverty. You know, maybe there's some limits to the current model that we're working with and we need to change that. The Community Wealth Building Bill was just passed in Parliament as well, so maybe the changes from this bill we'll see reflected into the next Parliament. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the big challenge, isn't it? It's like, what do we do differently after the election? How do we deliver public services in a different way? How do we really fundamentally change things? And as you said, like the Community Wealth Building Bill, which is soon to be an act, is a really big part of that. So, yeah, you've got things like the growth of social enterprises, of course, what we're most interested in, the growth of cooperatives, employee-owned businesses, this kind of thing. And that's a really big part of it. That's a really big part of how we do things differently and dramatically increasing those numbers. But it's like, it's really just using our imaginations a bit better. And, you know, the election, any election is time for a reset. It's a good opportunity for a reset. And it's like, how do we do things differently? And also, how do we campaign differently to make sure governments are listening to us and what we're saying? So you mentioned tax, for example. I mean, I've got a big issue with tax. So I think, you know, we have a tax system, we have more progressive income tax in Scotland, for example, but what else can we do? There's loads of options here. It's an unlimited, you know, menu of options in terms of tax. Yes, the tax base, you could say it's limited, but there's things like land taxes, for example. We don't really tax land. You know, there are billionaires with owning lots of land, for example, and that's not really a thing. You know, we don't really do that. Council tax, you know, I won't go on about council tax, to be honest, but it's called the hated council tax. I think that's probably all we need to know about that. But
yeah, there is recognition across every single political party in Parliament right now that council tax needs reform and needs to be changed. So I think not seeing anything changed on council tax would be quite a bad and poor reflection of the Parliament. At the hustings we attended recently with the political parties, they said basically the same thing, is that they all have different ideas on how to reform it, but it definitely does need to be changed. So I think we'll probably, hopefully see that into the next Parliament. But, I mean, this Parliament isn't going to be judged, this future Parliament isn't going to be judged on the ambition it sets out. It'll be what can it do with the constraints that are put on it by this kind of fiscal grey area that we'll be in the future. And I think that's where you're right if we're talking about social enterprise, because that's what the outcome is going to be. It's like there's going to be more reliance on these models to work. I mean, the government has a current ambition to triple the number of inclusive democratic business models by 2038, I believe. So that will involve our sector quite heavily. The UK government also has the ambition to double the number of cooperatives. So we'll be working cooperatively with the co-ops across Scotland as well to try and make sure that those numbers can come through successfully. So I think it's quite a big job over the next 5 years. But if we have this investment and if we have support in our local areas for social enterprises, then things could actually happen. And I think it's worth being carefully optimistic as well. We have 43 MSPs standing down at this election. Some reports have said that we will see about 70 to 75 new MSPs. So I think that's a huge opportunity to kind of refresh the palette in Parliament, educate MSPs very quick and introduce MSPs to their local constituents and their local social enterprises as well, to kind of get them around the table to see what we're about and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key point. Is there's an opportunity here. That's the key word, isn't it? Really, opportunity. That there's lots of new MSPs, lots of new people in Parliament who might not know anything about social enterprise or other types of inclusive democratic businesses. So there's a real job for us there to kind of get in there early and just kind of give them more propaganda and just tell them all about social enterprise effectively. But I think one of the key things as well, you mentioned, I suppose, quite a number of policy areas there as well. And I think one of the issues is bringing them together a bit more. So we've got lots of policy agendas where there's lots of overlap, lots of similarities, but it's like, how do we bring those together in a bit more of a harmonious way? So yeah, the IDBM report, community wealth building, all these things kind of fit together naturally, but also the fair work agenda as well. How does fair work fit into all this as well? And taxation, as we've mentioned, like how does the taxation reform agenda fit into all that as well? How can tax, just to come back to tax again, benefit social enterprises, for example? How can we invest more in social enterprises through the tax system, that kind of thing? So it's just really, it's complicated and it's difficult, but it's how do we bring these agendas together a bit more, these policy agendas, and how do we help government really as well? It's a job for us to help government to do that, I think, as well.
Yeah, and it's not just Scottish Government as well, because obviously the majority of tax is a reserved power to Westminster. However, that doesn't mean that the Scottish Government shouldn't be pushing Westminster to try and change things that are happening around that. You know, if there was hypothetically a tax incentive to open and start a social enterprise or a co-op or whatever it may be, then you'd see definitely a change in the market to more people doing this for their local communities. And also, you know, I think there needs to be a little bit of an effort on the Scottish Parliament as well to get a little bit more creative when it comes to the taxation powers that they already do have. But what's interesting about the new Parliament, I think, is that on current polling levels, it looks like it's going to be quite fragmented. There looks like there will only be a minority government, so that will most likely be the SNP. They'll have to work with all the political parties to pass different things that they aim to do. So I think that opens up opportunities for us as well, actually. So with a fractured parliament, that means there's a reliance on a fewer and fewer number of MSPs. So I think getting our manifesto in front of them would be a great step in opening that door to kind of them thinking about what are the social enterprise solutions to these policy problems that are being presented in front of us, do you know? And time again, if you look at who does the Scottish public trust to solve policy issues, politicians don't show highly on to be trusted. However, third sector organisations and social enterprises show up very highly, that they are trusted partners that they'd be delivering for Scotland. So I'm hoping that the next Parliament will take heed of this and listen to what we're saying and what we're presenting them.
And as you say, it'll be interesting to see what does happen with the election, because we're, you know, everyone's making these assumptions, I guess, as well, which are probably going to come true in terms of the polling numbers. So the SNP will probably be the biggest party. Who knows? But there probably will be. But I suppose it's like, what does the rest of the Parliament look like, really, as well? What are the numbers for the other parties? Could two opposition parties come together and form a majority? That could happen, for example. The SNP might not be in power in that sense as well. It's, again, probably unlikely, but I think in terms of the polling numbers. But anything can kind of happen as well. And like, obviously there's a reform factor as well. They're going to be probably new in Parliament as well. There's probably going to be some there. I keep saying probably, because opinion polls are pointing to the fact that they will be there. And it's how does that change the dynamic of the Parliament as well? So you have had this kind of, I don't want to say cosy consensus, but kind of, in a way, there is a kind of, you know, centre-left element in the Parliament as well. And that will, you know, it will disrupt things regardless of what happens, kind of thing. That will be a disrupting factor to that kind of consensus, which has been there for a long time within the Parliament, with a lot of the same people there as well. And obviously not just different parties in Parliament, but different individuals as well. That's what we said before, I suppose. But there will be lots of new people who are brand new to politics, actually, not just brand new to social enterprise and things we're doing, but brand new to politics. So just coming back to that point again around opportunities, there is a real opportunity here as well to say to people, this is what social enterprise is, you know, kind of starting from scratch for a lot of them. But there'll probably be people who worked in the third sector as well on the flip side. So there'll be people who know social enterprises really well, know charities really well, know the local communities really well. Again, there's an opportunity there as well, that they can be really strong allies for us, I think, as well.
Yeah, and you know, I think in a parliament without majorities, the policy making that happens and the ideas that get voted through eventually are the ones that actually work, because you're bringing people around the table to look at the practicalities of this, look at what's happening. The Community Wealth Building Bill is a great example of this. That passed unanimously in the Scottish Parliament at stage 3. after a few amendments and adjustments to it. But I mean, listen, that's exactly what parliamentary democracy is all about, is that you need that consensus amongst there to govern properly. So I think that we'll probably see more of that going into the future, but only if it's surrounded by quite good, strong policy ideas, which I think fairly we have presented in our manifesto to the political parties and to the Scottish government as well. And, you know, this isn't going to be a manifesto that we throw away after this election. This will be something that we'll be pointing to the entire time, be like, this isn't just policy for campaigning. This is, you know, essentially an offer to govern properly in Scotland, is to follow through with these points. Because we've mentioned tax in there. We'll talk about community energy and the ownership of that energy as well. So a lot of renewable changes happening in the Highlands and Islands. There's a lot going on in the Central Belt as well. And it's who owns this is a huge question coming forward for this Parliament, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ownership, community ownership, we need to dramatically increase that, I think, to be honest. I mean, we've done some really good work with the Community Empowerment Act, for example, and there are various reviews of that, but I think we need to dramatically increase the amount of community ownership we have in our economy. But I think one of the key words as well you said there was consensus. That's quite a good word for social enterprise, because social enterprise, you know, and, you know, similar organizations do create that consensus along, you know, party lines kind of thing. So as you said, the community wealth building bill, there was a real unity around that. There was a kind of like, okay, this is good, you know, across political parties, regardless of people's views. And it's the same with social enterprise. We're in a fortunate position, I think, in a lot of ways, that we can sell that message to various parties and people are like, oh yeah, I understand what that is. I understand the value to my local community around all this kind of thing. I think that's really important. So I think we can help with that consensus building. Our sector can do that really well, using community wealth building as an umbrella, I think, for a lot of that.
Completely. And, you know, community wealth building is about creating wealth locally and it being retained locally as well. And I think whatever side of the political spectrum you fall on, that sounds like something that you can probably sign up to fairly easily. And our social enterprises are a great example of this. You know, we've seen our own membership increase year on year. We've seen more people applying to our awards, and we've seen greater engagement with the conferences that we hold as well. So I think at our next conference, which I believe is in June, we expect more people to be out. I think that's fair to say. We want people there and engaging with us.
Absolutely, and new people as well. And this is the key as well, isn't it? It's like young people coming forward saying, we want to do something different. You know, I'm an entrepreneur or whatever. I want to do something different kind of thing. And just engaging different audiences, I think that's really important as well. So we've got quite a big membership. I mean, I think it's reached like 1,000 members, I think we reached, didn't we? Which is a really good milestone. It's a really amazing milestone, to be honest. And as you said, like our engagement through our conferences, events has increased. But it's like, how do we reach new audiences, in terms of young entrepreneurs, but also private sector people as well. I mean, we work with private sector organisations already in terms of the Buy Social campaign, but it's like, what else can we do to really engage people? And I just feel like there is, again, opportunity, to really engage people who are thinking of setting up a business, but are like, well, how can I do this differently?
And I think that comes into one of the strengths that we have working in policy, is the fact that we have over 1,000 members behind us. So anything that we present to a political party or to government or to a local MSP, they know that this is backed up by them as well. You know, we have a very open policy discussion in Social Enterprise Scotland. We invite our members in to discuss policy, to engage with policy. It's not myself and Duncan dictating the policy, it's down to the members themselves. And I think that's crucially important for this kind of stuff, because again, it's that consensus building. It's that, no, these are real issues that we're seeing out here. Here are the practical policy solutions to this. Let's see it actually happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that's a really important point to make as well around. We've got like a policy advisory group, for example, which we've had for, I can't think how long for, like a year and a half, maybe something like that now. And that's made up of our grassroots members, you know, telling us what their policy needs are and just, you know, informing what we're doing as well. You know, in a way, I'm like MSPs, I see us as a blank sheet of paper, and it's like we need to go out there and find out what's happening on the ground in terms of real life policy. And I suppose that feeds into that issue around, you know, what we're always calling the policy implementation gap as well. It's kind of like the real world versus the legislation. And I think, you know, we've talked about community wealth building, but it's like, that's a really good example, I think, of that as well. A good piece of legislation, you know, very simple, straightforward legislation. Again, consensus, of course, but it's like, that's passed, that's brilliant. So how does that translate into the real world? So obviously we'll constantly speak to our members to find that out. But yeah, it's that kind of ongoing challenge, and we need to keep our I suppose, our attention with our members and, local communities as well, to make sure that, what we're doing at a national level with legislation, with MSPs, etc., does translate into the real world. And that's a big challenge.
Completely. And we've a total open door policy with any of our members who want to discuss policy. They can drop us an email at any time and we can get into the nitty gritty of policy making in Scotland. But I think the blank sheet of paper is a great point that you've made there, because as we've said earlier, these will be completely new MSPs into Parliament. So they will be, some of them quite literally, completely blank sheets of paper. So it's up to us and the engagement of our members to kind of direct the way and direction of travel for a little while into this new Parliament, particularly due to the financial constraints that we've talked about, but also is to make sure that we can actually deliver on some of the ambitions that have been set out here. And, we're hopeful that a few things in the manifestos that will soon be published for the political parties we'll hopefully recognise from our own manifesto.
Yeah, I suppose it's also an open offer to not just the new MSPs, but to the new government, whoever that might be as well, just to say we're here, use us as a resource to say that, to inform your policy making. We're a big resource. We've got a huge membership. We can, survey people. We can inform policy, and I think that's one of the key points as well, is just getting that really informed, evidence-based policy. And I think this is a real issue in policy and government in general, is getting that evidence base, and we need to do better at that in terms of getting the research evidence, but. We do have the social enterprise census, of course, things like that. But it's like, what else can we do as well to inform that policy making? And I think for politicians, who have particular views about certain things, it's difficult for them sometimes as well to really get that evidence base and just like make sure that their decision making is based on that, what's actually happening in the real world.
And I think that neatly ties in with the consensus politics that we're looking for here. I think everybody's a little bit tired of similar arguments and similar sides being drawn consistently. And that if we do have this clear evidence-based policy making, then that is surely very easy to find consensus over.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and I think that whole issue around joining these things together, I think we've just done that there, is that bringing these different strands together, not just policy areas, but the kind of the ways of working, consensus, evidence-based, these things all feed into each other, really. I think that's one of the key points here as well. And I think I'm really keen on us just doing more research as well. We've got our Universities and Social Economy Forum, which we run on a regular basis here at GCU, actually. And I think that's going really well, just to really bring academics and other people working in universities together and informing, so they can inform each other, but also informing them about social enterprise.
Yeah, there's a great piece of research actually that's been happening at GCU recently to do with the connection in community wealth building and health outcomes. So this is jumping on the work that has already been done by Public Health Scotland, and that was presented at our last CPG. So that's our cross-party group that we have in Parliament, which we'll be hosting into the next parliamentary period as well, as long as we can get MSPs to sign up for that, but I'm sure we will. And that shows that, again, this wealth being kept in communities is fighting poverty, but also having long-term health outcomes, because people are less stressed. If you have secure work, you're less stressed about where money's coming from, right? And then from that, you can build up more. So this research base is crucially important. But additionally, on top of that, we talk to universities about their spin-outs and their business support that they have for social enterprises. So there's some great examples across Scotland, not just in GCU, but at Queen Margaret University. They've been really engaged with Edinburgh Social Enterprise Network and Glasgow Social Enterprise Network about getting students in to realise the power of social enterprises, because at the moment I think we need to see a much more increase in young people getting involved, and there is that increase happening, but more and more young people being socially and environmentally conscious about what's happening in the world. Social enterprise is the perfect environment for them to bring in their ideas and absolutely grow them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea of the kind of some of the practical stuff we're doing. I think that's quite exciting, what GSEN and ESEN have been doing actually with getting students into social enterprises and getting their expertise into social enterprises. That's what it's all about. I think that's just a good example of, the outcomes of some of the stuff we've been doing as well. Sometimes, you have a forum and it's just a talking shop kind of way, kind of thing. But I think that's a really good, practical outcome, I think, of some of the stuff we've been doing.
And that ties this all neatly together in a bow for me, which is we have the legislation on community wealth building, but that doesn't mean it instantly happens overnight. And the fact that this has been happening before even the bill was passed and is now enacted in Parliament is that community wealth building has been happening in Scotland for many years. We as a sector know this, we've been doing it ourselves. So the fact that we now have legislation backup for this means that we need to be the ones taking the reins here, showing them this is how you create wealth in communities, you need to involve us here. whether that's through your local authorities and engaging with their economy teams and their procurement teams, because social enterprise has been involved in the procurement of really high spends, is the absolute key point to community wealth building. You need these anchor organisations putting in relationships and connections with the local community to ensure that community stays community and that these areas thrive, you know.
Yeah, and I think, I'm often saying that social enterprise is community wealth building, and obviously, yeah, we have been doing this for years kind of thing. So, technically speaking, we're one pillar in the community wealth building bill, but, we kind of cover all different parts of it. And it's good to see, just to come back to the bill briefly, that it has changed a bit and it's been strengthened as the process has gone by. So the first draft was pretty good, but then it's more explicit in terms of its support for social enterprise development now as well. And I quite like that change where I think the original bill said something along the lines of, local authorities may do this, and it's now saying you will do this. It's kind of like, it's good that we've now got that kind of really clear legislative, steer for local authorities and other public bodies and ourselves as well, just to really drive community wealth building. So again, it always comes back to, that's good legislation. How's it implemented in the real world, kind of thing. So
absolutely, and I suppose we use this as an opportunity, as a bit of an open call to local authorities and to public bodies, that if they feel that they don't know what to do around the community wealth building bill, to get in touch, and that we can get them involved with our members in their local areas, and then they'll be achieving community wealth building by even just engaging with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to come back to what you said before about open door policy, absolutely, we're here as a resource, as a policy team, but also as Social Enterprise Scotland, as a really hopefully useful resource to public bodies, local authorities, government, just to say, yeah, we've got the expertise through our membership, and yeah, come along, speak to us, talk about policy. That's what we're here for.
It's our favourite thing in the world.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening, folks. This has been Building Wealth, Building Community, Social Enterprise Scotland podcast with me, Andy Patterson, and Duncan Thorpe. If you need to get in touch at any time about all things social enterprise, please do visit socialenterprise.scot. Goodbye for now.